Good day, good day, good day. And I want to welcome each and every one of you to another morning here at All for Success X. That's everything in support of the Sussex family, of course. That is Harry and Meghan, Mama Doria, little Lilibet, and Archie. But it is also the X, which might mean that I might stray off into conversations and topics about other things. But there's still going to be things that are of interest, and sometimes I'll actually weave it back to the Sussex family. But hopefully, either way, you will try to enjoy it. So, good day, good day, good day to all. Now, I have not had time. Um, this has been one of those days, and I cannot explain it, but some of you may understand what I mean. That it's the type of morning that when you go to do something that's pretty simple, like let's say you go to get a glass of water out of the refrigerator. Well, that means there's no water in the refrigerator, okay? Or you're looking for ice cubes, and well, you're out of ice cubes. It's just one of those days that things that are generally very simple and very straightforward, but for some reason, they are difficult to master today. Um, Now, while I'm blathering on about stuff like that, I want you all to remember that here at All for sorry, I'm getting tongue tied. All for Success today. Don't forget to put in the comments below at least a thumbs up or a little bit of a note on what your fitness journey may be. Each week, I love to hear from people who say they have either walked or gone running. Some of us are going into the gym from time to time, and I would like to know just how you're getting along or how you are moving forward and progressing. Now, my report, and if I have an opportunity, I'll also add it to the chat, that this week I was able to get to the gym. Okay. Um, while I was in the gym, I had a chance to hit the elliptical, which is not a bad little workout machine. And most people go on, they kind of walk, run on the elliptical about 30 minutes to some people go up to an hour. I do not, but some people can actually be on there for about an hour. I have even seen several people in the gym with me, and they are actually putting in about 10 miles or so on the elliptical, which I find that to be amazing, or at least that's the distance that they're tracking. I that is amazing to me. Now, this week I generally um, did about 15 minutes on the elliptical, so I was able to make 15 minutes, and then the day before that, that I was in the gym, I was on the elliptical for 30 minutes. And so, what's fun about that is I will get on the elliptical. I'll often pull up on my phone a Sussex friendly channel, and I'll have on headphones and listen to the Sussex friendly channel while I am on the elliptical or on the bike, whichever machine that I am on. And I found that to be really entertaining. And it's funny because by doing it that way, I almost forget that I'm in the gym, and it's a way to kind of motivate me. So, this is another method of motivating each other. Get out there. All right. If you're right now and you want to go for a walk, or you're out going for a bike ride, or you're about to run some errands, this is a great little um, video, a wonderful chat to listen to. Turn the volume up so you can hear it while you're doing whatever that errand is. But I want to tell all of you, thank you for coming. Additionally, don't forget to share if you have someone that may be interested in what I have to say. Like and subscribe. I'm still working on my numbers. I'm a little new at gaining many followers and getting the support. I am reading about how to do that. So I might hopefully make a little bit more of a dent in my process. So for those of you who want to help along, and then when I get to those numbers that I need help and moderators and all of those heavy duty assistances, I hope that many of you will love to volunteer or join in with your services. It's going to be exciting. Now, once again, um, once again, make sure that as I get ready to start chatting about, again, things that support the Sussex family, make sure that you are, I would say, in the right mindset. Sometimes you can listen to some of these channels or you can participate on some of these processes. And what I don't want you to do is to get yourself in an emotional state that is actually more upsetting than you would be normally. I am hoping that when we chat that you actually leave feeling a little bit lighter, a little bit better, and able to face some things that are going on all around you with a more positive attitude. I am always trying to seek out at least a way to look at things in the world in a way that you can process what's happening on around you, understand the events of the day, but at the same time maintain a level of understanding or distance. And I don't mean distance as in not caring, but maintaining a layer of distance that will allow you to function without being in any type of pain. Okay. And I mean mental anguish. So that is always my goal. And so I'm hoping that when you join in on this chat that you can um, have that type of an interaction. So that's why I'm really interested in the type of things that people are doing to stay fit. So make sure that you motivate each other by let's talk about what we're doing on our fitness journey. So now you've got from me that this week we tried the elliptical and I enjoyed it. It was pretty nice. So I would love to hear from you if you're out walking, how many steps you're getting in, and also if you're doing some type of yoga, what type and how you're progressing. For those who are in the process of learning how to breathe or do all of the type of techniques that help the body stretch, which is Pilates, things like that. And even a friend of mine started a dance class, which I thought was phenomenal. It was they are starting in on a ballroom dance class. And I thought, oh, that's kind of cool. And it got me started to thinking maybe I should start looking for like maybe salsa or something because all of those classes, when you do dance or anything like that, it is definitely going to be a workout. So please let us know what you are thinking of doing. All right, so let me get into it because I'm not going to keep everybody here all morning because I know that you have things to do, right? And so do I. So anyway, but depending on how much time I spend here, you could probably get in a mile or so if you're walking. So let's go with first disclaimer. All right. With all of the YouTube presenters, we generally have a disclaimer in our YouTube feature, or some people even announce their disclaimer at the beginning. And I've taken to making more of a pointed statement about that disclaimer because this month I've decided to have a chat that may lean toward topics of not exactly government and politics, but where we might cross into a little bit of religion, maybe, and a little bit of what I would call um, occult topics. I do want to make sure that you understand I am not professing anything of any kind, nor am I trying to convince you of becoming anything in any particular place. So it's just more informational. And when I talk about the topics that I talk about, it is always in general from a historic, literary point of view. For example, I may talk about a story written about a book about cars, but that doesn't mean I'm telling you to go buy any cars, right? I'm basically talking about a book about cars. And so you have to be very careful these days because for some bizarre performative reason, there is a cultural shift in our language. And I'm not sure if this is a product of social media. I'm not sure if it's a product of current education, but there has somehow um, what I would call somehow it has appeared there has been a cultural shift in language and the use of language that it is often purposely misunderstood when people are speaking. There is a purposeful misunderstanding that the topic they may be speaking on is either directed at an individual or speaking about an individual, or perhaps even trying to convince, coerce um, other people. Now, interestingly, that could be because in our current media landscape, because media now is everything, right? I mean, at this current time that we're living in, almost I don't know what the percentage would be, but you could kind of judge it somewhere between 70 perhaps and 90%. Everything is in the media in some form or another, right? What people do every day, where people go, how they think and feel about everything is somehow broadcast across media in some form. So that's a lot. And so I believe what is happening, and I could be way off base, but I believe what is happening is that culturally, we are beginning to bring the method of speech and the way we operate in relationships in terms of a media landscape. So, for example, long time ago, you could just have a conversation about the weather. And you could maybe talk about the fact that, wow, it's been sunny lately. A person might say, well, this season it's been dry. However, now that conversation, as simple as those two statements are, the subject matter might be perceived as, are you saying that there's climate change? You know, the conversation itself may become accusatory in some fashion, when in the past it was simply just a conversation or just a typical conversation or statement that somebody might make in order to create a conversation. So that seems to be where we are in some weird way. Okay. But anyway, so sit back, guys. Get your coffee ready. If you're going to sit and relax a few moments, have your coffee, and let's have some fun chatting about a few things. And I only have a few slides today because, like I said, just like whether or not I had ice cubes in the fridge, um, my gathering of slides and pictures was a little bit on the downside. So I'm going to have to up my game in that in that respect. But whew, it's going to be a work in progress. So just give me a moment to get set up here. Okay, so we are trying to get it together here. All right, so although this is not one of my better pictures, it's one of the slides that I always like to start with because why? Because Harry is in a great mood and he's laughing and he's jolly and he's and this is during his interview, I think, originally with Stephen Colbert. And I like this photo because it reminds me of the same. This photo was going around and this was his behavior on Stephen Colbert. At the same time, articles and trolls, if you want to call them that, in the UK at the same time were making statements like, he's just not the same Harry that he used to be. He's not as jolly as he used to be. He used to be so much fun. And of course, what you're supposed to take away from that is after he got married, he became a horrible person. Well, what is reality? Well, most of us who support the family Sussex would instead view that his reality is more along the lines of he was not exactly jolly and happy coming up in that family, that he instead was perhaps um, feeling pretty bad most of the time. And it wasn't until he became aware and involved with Meghan that he understood perhaps that there is a different type of happiness that he can have, that he in fact could be happy, and that he did not have to be always the royal court clown, right? He did not have to be in the role of the court jester, playing up always to his betters, right? Which is the way that they would look at it in the royal family. But that instead he could be an entity unto himself. He could develop a life for himself, and he could actually live according to the type of things in his world that he preferred to live in accordance with. I think that is more likely, that's much more closer to the truth than the attitudes that they want you to believe, right? And so that's how I look at Harry in that time period, that he was probably gaining a little bit more um, fun for himself, um, a little bit more life, or what do they say, a little bit more pep in his step. That's what I think. And of course, same thing here, marriage to Meghan. Although I think this photo is so funny. I believe this photo is probably a little bit more monitored. What do you call it? When they airbrush different things and make people look a little bit younger than they were, or whatever. But this is when they were young and, just getting started. And they were probably looking at their future lives through the eyes of how wonderful it was about to be. And, they had this idea, and I would say idea, but slash ideal belief in how their life was going to turn out. And of course, this is normal for young people, right? Again, I'm a parent of adult children. Young children coming up will always have a specific ideal, an ideal living condition under which they think their future will be. They have a perception of how their future is going to turn out. They may look at the lives that their parents and grandparents are living, and they are absolutely certain that if they make a slight change or alter a certain behavior, that will fix everything in their future, and that they will not at all succumb to any of the negative um, life's challenges that their parents and grandparents experienced, right? And that is normal. That is often the belief of young people. As a matter of fact, they really can't help but believe that when you get right down to it. And it is only that as time goes on, and as experiences are had, that young people begin to understand that perhaps they can still have a great life and enjoy the life they would like to enjoy, but that it just might be a little bit more difficult to maintain or achieve than perhaps they first thought. And of course, that is absolutely the truth, right? And so that's the kind of thing that we all learn as we learn and grow. That is just the normal, what you call the normal routine of our lives as we learn and grow. Okay, so that's the beauty, basically, the beauty of life. And like I said, if you are someone who is understanding how our world works, then you too begin to understand that this is how our lives unfold. They become a little bit more um, difficult as time goes on, depending on what it is you might be facing. So that is, I think, a wonderful way to always see the world. Now, quickly, let's go. I'm sorry. I've just kind of been musing here, sitting here as if I'm just looking out the window and speaking in my own head. But musing, I just wanted to say, yes, what we're going to look at, what we're going to think about to keep in the back of our thoughts, because we're here to uplift each other and uplift others, is to think about the many things that are going on in our world today. And our news is filled with all manner of conflicts all over the world. And so we are all of us who do pray, we are going to pray for a lot of support, and we want to pray for moderation, because there is so much going on in the world. So, of course, these requests for these prayers, you're hoping that the saints are out there and thinking about how to support and help each other. So, with that being said, now, there is a lot going on, and we are hoping that many people can work on all of their lives and their life support. And we're hoping that life support stays out there for all those who need it, because people are facing some really tough times. Okay, so now it's time to get into what I normally get into. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, just be aware that we have not forgotten Dan Wooten. Oh, but we haven't forgotten. And that we know that you and all of your cruel comments about the Sussex family over the years, which is what, 3, 4, 5? We haven't forgotten how you were uh, almost like a deranged lunatic, exposing it, whatever you could find to expose, and being a part of the I would say circle of personalities that made sure that Harry and Meghan had no peace. Yes, we have not forgotten you. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to announce that the word on the street is that this gentleman who was making so much money and had purchased himself a wonderful home somewhere in the cost of millions, well, he had to put that on the market because he needs to get out of town. And he's having a little bit of a difficult time getting that off of his hands. You know, just because you paid $1 million for it doesn't mean someone will buy it from you for $1 million. But anyway, that's the real estate business. So you got to pay attention. Oh, but Mr. Wooten is, like I said, we're not done. The universe is not done with you yet. Now, I don't know how this is going to play out because, ladies and gentlemen, people like this. They could go wherever they go and show up somewhere else, and they might have friends that owe them favors somewhere. And you could see this person return back, and they would probably think that they are in a semblance of their former glory. But for this particular moment right here in time, this young man is looking at a situation where he too has to sell his home, get out of Dodge, and he's trying to find a place to go because, he's just not feeling all that welcomed in the United Kingdom. So he's supposed to be heading back to New Zealand, where he began all of his, well, infamous media beginnings. And there you have it, ladies. That's what's going on lately. Okay, so we're going to keep an eye on this person. We're going to keep an eye on his goings and comings because you know what? I think there's more to come. But this just goes to show you that sometimes you might think that what you are doing, you're never going to get called out for it, or that you're never going to see the result of it again. But there's an old saying, and it goes, I don't know if I have it right, but it goes something like this. You need to be very concerned about what you do early in the morning, because it's late in the evening that you may find that you need to deal with the result. And that brings me to another wonderful character that I noticed they're paying very, very close attention to what I would call real world events these days. Okay, they're trying to become more, what's the word? More of a legitimate, I would say, or a more of an actual um, media middle of the road type of individual. That's what they're attempting to do. But just in the same way, likewise, it's very difficult to do that when your approach has been one sided and basically terminal to other people along the way. So I'm going to say perhaps this person might have a more difficult time being tied up in whatever I would say I don't want to say retribution, but receiving on the receiving end of what many of us would feel is just. It may take a little bit more, but I still believe that in their case, they are getting an indication of what their future might look like. And I think it's becoming pretty clear to them that they need to tread a little bit carefully about dealing with the family Sussex. Now, what you notice is that they're still doing that thing, and excuse me, I'm coughing. They're still doing that thing that I always have this question. Can any of you ever recall? Can you recall, or can you picture in your mind interview forums where the person who is doing the interview is constantly asking whomever they're hosting or whomever their guests are, um, they pose a question so that you will say something negative about the person they're asking about. Like, you know, it became one of these weird phenomena on these talk shows, interview shows, what I call Maury Povich, Jerry Springer types. In the old days, it used to be Geraldo Rivera. But you know, you have a guest come on, whether they're a movie star or a media person or a public figure, and when they come on, you're asking questions, hoping that they're going to say something negative about the person that you're talking about. So you sit down, here's a guest, they come on the Oprah show, and they'll ask Diana Ross. Okay, Diana Ross comes on the Oprah Winfrey show, and she's talking to Oprah Winfrey, and then Oprah Winfrey asks her a question like, well, did you really ever like, Maureen Donovich or the other Supremes? As if she wants her to say something negative about the other Supremes, because that would immediately generate some type of huge media storm and a huge cascade of storytelling to have people running around finding out, does Diana Ross like the other Supremes? Did she say something bad about the other Supremes? And then you could have that media story going on for like weeks. And this is what became the popular like media tabloid TV nonsense. So, you would get, of course, politicians on your show, and then you would ask a politician a question and hope that they would say something negative about the president, right? or say something negative about other politicians that they worked for. And this became what was being fed to the public. It was just constant conflict. And so it got to the point where, and I'm thinking it's basically still in that same place where there is no, you're getting very little information in your media airwaves. You're getting very little information about what's happening in and around you. For you're basically being fed only what is going to drive more storytelling and more conflict and more of a state of being upset, right? So it's car wreck, bad weather, tragedy, 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 and that is what we are being fed. So, think back and kind of get yourself a mindset or an understanding that, there's a generation now that is all that they have seen in the public airways. It's just all negative. I don't know what prompted media to become that, only that they began to notice that this is what made money. Just if you could create conflict, fights, confusion in the airwaves and on in newspapers, then you had a money making machine, right? So they're going to constantly throw out these silly, ridiculous stories about the family Sussex, and constantly when they're talking to other people, the only thing they're going to ask about is when someone else shows up on his show, no matter who it is, and he generally brings on people that he feels that they will have some type of conflict with the Sussex family. So they will generally bring on people that will say something negative, i.e., the Osborne family, or I can't remember, yeah, Katy Perry, someone like that. Everyone wants to, all of these detractors, that is, they'll dredge these people up from I don't know where. And then, of course, they want to have a conversation about how it is that you don't like the Sussexes, right? And people are actually on television to do this. I mean, at this point, the Osborne family, who had their own reality type TV show, because they were attempting somewhat to become like the Kardashian family, with that Osborne family business of being on TV or in their reality show. But of course, the Kardashians have a whole they, the Kardashian industry of being a family in the public eye is actually organic. They have actually organically been that. The Osborne family, of course, they're at a place in their world when you have to ask yourself, were people really interested in the Osborne family? Right? Was there something about the family of Osborns that other people were interested in knowing? And that's the thing, they're because they had been famous and the rock star father was famous many, many years ago. That doesn't necessarily translate into I want to watch your family forever from now on. So that was one of those things that they're going to find difficult. And so I just want everyone to stand back and wait, give yourself some time, because you know this character here, I think they're going to go the same way as this character here, right? I think that they're going to find that they have a lot in common, and that eventually they may all end up in the same situation. So and if that's the case, yeah, I find that perfectly acceptable. I have no problem with it. And, I might even give an applause if that is the case. So we're going to stand by and wait for that. Okay, so now, all right, we're about to, like I told you guys, I said I wasn't going to stay on here long, but hey, what happens? I get to rambling. Okay, so Once again, I told you guys that in October, for the sake of October, we were going to introduce some thoughts. I want to give you some thought processes that are definitely aligned with Halloween. And what I've been going over for these couple of weekends is how witchcraft, right? How witchcraft had its origins, and how many things are considered witchcraft, and why those origins might have some bearing on what you may see in what's going on today. All right. And I want you all to think about, is there any conclusion to draw here? I don't know. Is there any comparison to draw? I don't know. I have many in my own head, but I find that they are um, fun to think about. So, as we talked about the origin of witchcraft in the past week or so, we all know that its origins are ancient, like they're very pagan, and they have a lot of strings are spread throughout different types of mythologies and in different types of booklets or different types of media. Now, most people are familiar with what we would call the modern day version of what is witchcraft. That's all these stories about witchcraft. Oh, and don't forget Harry Potter, which was huge, right? So that's kind of a modern day version of how witchcraft is presented to us, right? It's supposed to be harmless and benign, or in some cases, good versus the bad. And you're supposed to make your choices in that realm, and the type of powers that you're using and where they're coming from. And remember, also, in the world of most of our modern day witch world, there are supposed to be rules, right? There's supposed to be ways that you're supposed to do things and things that you're not supposed to do. But I'm going to just make a couple of what I call observations about things I have learned about um, witchcraft and its origins, how it's talked about perhaps in the Bible, right? And what type of behaviors you might be seeing, and whether or not that could be attributed to some form of that practice. So I don't know if any of you recall. So the hysteria surrounding what was considered witchcraft after in after, I would say, the main discussions about it in the Bible is in Europe. For some reason, in Europe during what we would call the Middle Ages, and I believe that was around the years 1400, 1400, 1500. The history in Europe at that time, it gets very murky. You hear about groups of people and tribes of people and different nations of people during the Middle Ages in Europe, but they sound like groups that are all scattered all over the place and different, and they're just very separated from each other in their behavior. They have so many different languages, but there's one thing that is somewhat of a string throughout. And I like to point this out so that you can then look up more information about it, and if you find it interesting like I do. But since ancient times, in a royal setup or in the royal making, there was always a description of how the royal courts might be set up and how they were handled, right? So in those royal courts, you had the family, the king, the queen, and they were generally in the middle of decision making about the entire kingdom, like whatever their wants, whatever their desires were. That is generally what most people tried to um, fill for the king and queen. Like they basically gave their ideas of how they wanted, their vision of how they wanted to see things operate. And supposedly they were supposed to be fairly knowledgeable. And in some cases, the person who became the king is simply the strongest. That would have been someone that was able to go out and sword fight and beat up everybody else and make everybody, kowtow and bend down. And other people did not want to fight with this person, right? Now, that was pretty much the same almost throughout the world. And once their family was put in place, then generally they just went down that family line. But let's talk about some of the side characters. In most of these royal courts, the people who actually kept the kingdom running were those who were owners of the lands, right? Or they were the people who could maintain or upkeep the lands, or if there was someone who had a specific types of trades and knowledge, right? So they may have been people who knew how to make um, a particular type of food, or they knew how to grow and farm. So they had access to the lands and things like that. They could grow barley, they could make beer, they could grow, I want to say olive trees, but they may have that, or they had nuts and vegetables, and they had potatoes. And so these people in the land ownership became the key personnel, and the people who worked for them, they maintained how things were working and flowing, just like the people who raised cattle or raised sheep, or, they were the ones that basically kept the actual processes required in that community, village, nation, right? So, it would just grow from there. So these are the guys that ended up with various titles like a baron or a duke or whatever, because they were basically managers of the type of resources that would be needed for that community, right? So if someone was a blacksmith, then he could make sure that all the tools and things were made for the people in that community. And he had that talent. So he might actually have a title if he was a manager of all the blacksmiths. And that's one layer of people who were in these communities and kingdoms. So then another layer were people who advised the king and queens. Now, throughout history, what is fascinating is in general, these people were most of the time, in most cases, and especially throughout like the Middle Eastern nations and the Oriental nations in the Far East, they're always described as people who have some type of ability or power that would afford them the opportunity to hold that job, right? So, in general, the people who were next to the kings or next to the queens, these people were described to have either the ability to predict the future in an uncanny way, or they were able to um, root out enemies to the kingdom. They may have an insight, it would appear, on who was going to try to harm the king. These characters always showed up next to the kings and queens because they saved the king from being assassinated, or they knew that the queen was being poisoned, and on the like. But in general, they were given kind of a privileged position in and around power because they appeared to have knowledge, capabilities that were somewhat superior, or if you want to call it, in some cases, supernatural to the other people around them. So they were often listed in the wizard or witch class. So, I mean, let's think about that time period, especially in Europe, the storyline around King Arthur. So, one of the key figures around King Arthur was, guess who? Does anyone remember? Do you remember? If you remember, you should say so. But Merlin, right? He was a key figure around King Arthur. He was advising King Arthur on what to do, how to do it, and supposedly helping to teach him and bring him up into the kingship. Now, of course, this is more of a mythical story, right? But yet that King Arthur character had that Merlin figure, right? When you think of the old Middle Eastern kings and queens, they always had the what? Grand Vizier was next to them. The Grand Vizier was always that character that seemed to be more powerful than everybody else. People were afraid of them. They were always lurking in the shadows. And their particular behavior was that they kept the king and queen safe, right? These individuals were generally from the point of view of, let's say, Walt Disney, or from the point of view of readers in these various mythos stories of the past and in the biblical stories. These characters were always seen as either supernaturally powerful, mythically powerful, or as times went on and as we marched down towards modern times, they would be wizard-like or witch-like, right? So you had Merlin, and you had Mordred, and you had what was the female's name? Morgana, right? Now in biblical times, it's pretty similar, and so I'm not gonna tell you the characters. I'm gonna have you guys do your homework, right? And let's look at who were the people that were actually um, next to the kings in the Bible. It's very similar. There were these different characters that they're going to talk about that were um, in the ear of the kings, even the kings that come down through the line of David. They all had advisors. And then here's what's really brilliant when you talk about it biblically. Some of the most powerful individuals in the Bible are those that were seen what? The closest to God. That they could actually have a conversation with God and God would respond to their conversation. That made them the most powerful people amongst their community. All right. So I just wanted to throw this. Why am I throwing this out there? So I'm just going to tie this up. And I'm not finished with my Halloween talk about witchcraft. I really am not. But I wanted to throw that out there because that's the type of homework, and I want you to come from that position when you are also looking at what we see happening with the royal family and perhaps the type of advice they are getting in trying to deal with Meghan and Harry, or the Sussex family, because some of their behavior and some of their maneuvers are exactly that. They are maneuvering. You know, put their advice to Kate and William to get out there and try to do and be and act like Harry and Meghan, to try to reach the people and be easy to talk to and easy to communicate with. Well, they're trying their best to play those roles, but only the people who are really not very bright can tell that it is performative, right? It's very Harry at Invictus. He was not performing. He's not pretending to be a good guy that wants to help those who have been injured in wartime. He's not pretending. However, when they trot out any of the other royals to be in some type of interaction with regular people, the behavior is very stiff and not very genuine because it's not really in them, right? So we talked last time about witchcraft and how there is a form of witchcraft called mimicry. And what is its goal? Confusion and trying to retell a story, right? But I think what is happening is that the royal family is finding that some of these things they're being advised to do are not working. Now, you might ask yourself, why are they not working? Well, we'll get into that hopefully by Halloween. But there's also the next part of that, which is what we call projection. Now, this is also a form of witchcraft tactic. Now, in the modern day, we call this psychological. right? But in the olden days, trying to do these things would have been considered a form of witchcraft or sorcery. When you try to make a person believe that they are actually guilty of an action that you are performing on them, that's called projection. But in the olden days, to make someone believe that they're actually the one that's guilty of something, that was considered, a form of witchcraft, because you were basically trying to control that person's mind. So if you hit me in the face and then I am able to say to you, I didn't hit you. Well, you're the one that hit me first, right? And I'm sure that you are actually seeing this play out in the world, even in political events, that there are actions being taken by people, that there's retaliation being taken by people. But in each case, whoever the perpetrator may be, they might turn around and say, I'm not the one doing this. It's actually you. You're doing it all to us. You are harming me. Meanwhile, the actual perpetrator of the harm was the original person. So that is called projection. And again, this was a form of witchcraft. At least that was the term applied to it. So now you might be seeing these types of behaviors, and you may see the media performing these types of media projects, which is actually psychological. So here they are trying to psychologically control what their readers read or what their viewers see and what their viewers believe. And this very activity was considered a form of witchcraft. And this type of activity was performed in a very huge way by those who were in power, because they generally had advisors and people who were around them who, more than anything in the world, wanted to maintain their power and their control of other people. So I find this fun. I really do. I don't want anybody to get all woo woo, or actually, you can get woo woo, but just get woo woo and be fun with it. But this is the type of study that was done over the years on how to keep people under control. So there are numerous methods, but these two I have run up on so far, because these are, in my opinion, this is the type of behavior that we are seeing among the royal family and um, their culprits who are trying to help them navigate what they are in the middle of, which is slowly becoming um, uninteresting, which equals possibly being done away with. And that is something that they really don't want to happen, not at the level that it could, right? So that is really important to kind of keep in mind. And I want you guys to watch out for this, because there was a character that was attributed with a particular quote and a thought process. And that character was, he was a very high ranking Nazi during World War II, which, of course, right now, everything that is negative is definitely going to find itself with a Nazi reference. But Joseph Goebbels, he was considered an individual who was always trying to um, coordinate psychological operations. And he was attributed with saying that you always accuse the other side of what you are actually guilty of. Now, I don't know if this is an accurate quote, so I have to make sure I say that, but he is often attributed with that statement. And it's pretty fascinating, because that is definitely what was done in the wake of their operation. Now, I'm also about to wrap it up, but I wanted to announce for you guys one last thing, that another episode or another series of The Crown is about to come out. I think it's due out on around the middle of November, like somewhere around the 15th or the 16th. And there is a combination of people kind of being nervous that it's coming out. There is supposed to be a feature, perhaps, of someone um, talking about Diana in it, as if Diana is going to make an appearance, so to speak, like they might have a appearance of her in postpartum, like she might come back as a ghost or something like that. But that's what they were talking about, and I think it's because they want to put that out there so that they can reduce any interest in it. So they're going to say that, oh, it's going to be awful. It's an awful idea that they're going to do that, and if they're going to do that, nobody should watch it. That's what they want to do first. But of course, I'm going to watch The Crown. I don't know about everybody else, but that's coming out. Another thing that happened this week, and I'm just going to make really quick mention of it. They were talking about King Charles and his speech, because generally they wouldn't have given any type of commentary with things that are happening in world affairs or world politics. But he made a speech and he talked about um, turmoil and international turmoil in his speech. I thought that was interesting. But he also said something that people want to attribute. They want to take this statement and they want to attribute it to him actually making a comment towards Harry and Meghan. And that's because he made a comment about what people do and say in the digital world or in social media. And he said people need to kind of reduce their anger in social media. So we will see how they continue to proceed as they are trying so very hard to approach many of the topics and many of the things that Harry and Meghan were proponents of. So now all of a sudden they're all involved in mental health. Supposedly these people who acted like Harry was never supposed to ask for help, and why is he whining? That's their famous word, right? He's always whining and whinging. But now they're always talking about mental health. Even had one of the people out dancing around and talking about mental health and how to help children with their mental health. Okay, so now they're doing that. Then they're also trying to talk about various things when it comes to reaching out to many of the people who live in the Caribbean and many minorities that are still living in the UK. So now all of a sudden they're becoming proponents of equal access, equal rights, and all of the wonderful things that Black people do. So now they're almost at that level where it's absolutely comical to watch. And then the last thing, which I thought was absolutely ridiculous, is they had poor Kate participating in a wheelchair rugby match. It was so absolutely ridiculous to do that, that I'm ashamed they even tried it. But with that said, what I'm going to do, I'm going to wrap this up. I'm going to thank each and every one of you for participating and coming to the chat. I'm so glad you at least made it out. And I hope that you guys continue on and have a continuous, wonderful day. And you continue to participate. And we have a wonderful photo here of Tyler Perry, because he's going to have some stuff coming out pretty soon. And I'll keep you posted on what that's going to be. And I want you each to think about these things that I'm saying. I know it may sound like it doesn't tie together, but I want you to know that if you take a step back, sometimes you have to take a step back a little bit farther so that you can see things from a distance, and it'll give you a better understanding of what you might be looking at and its origin. Because sometimes things have an origin. I mean, now the behaviors are actually repetitious, and often you don't realize that you're seeing things that are actually ancient in their source, right? And they may have been presented in a different way, but in fact, it is the exact same thing. So just keep in mind that you may be seeing people attempt psychological operations or trying to dupe the masses into believing a certain thing by performing things a certain way. But in the ancient times, these people who were thinking ahead, plotting and scheming against the masses and the population, in the ancient times, these people were generally crooks and charlatans, and they simply just had a knowledge about people that might have been more extensive than the average. And so that in turn made them more wise, made them appear almost supernatural in their behavior. So just keep that in mind. But then there's always, of course, some reference and commonality, even to biblical sources. You know, I'm still in that place in the Bible where we're wondering, some of these folks who were labeled witches and things like that, it is somewhat interesting, some of the skill sets that they are purported to have had. Once again, that's your homework. I would tell you, maybe I'll put it on the community page, but that's your homework to figure out and see if you see any patterns developing. Thank you guys again. I'm so sorry to keep you all so long, but if you were out walking, you definitely made 2 miles. So keep up the good work. Let me know how you're doing on your wonderful fitness journey. And always, always share, like, and subscribe because I am excited to keep all of you in mind, and you all are helping me stay motivated. So just keep that up and keep moving so that we all keep moving. I am excited. So let's keep it going because we need to. We all need to keep moving. All right, guys. So check it out. Hopefully, I'll get myself back online again next week, hopefully around the same time, and we will see how it goes. Bye bye.